Hello, welcome back to the Glasgow South Model Tram and Rail Group Workshops. Now today some of you were asking about jumping from board to board and how to best make the join between the tracks where they jump across from board to board. I'm going to be looking at that today. There's more than one way of doing it, and I'm going to show you two that we use on our layouts. So when I get the camera set up, as usual, I'll be back. So here we are. The first method I'm going to show you is what we did was you get your two boards side by side and we routed out an area. I think we used 9mm ply and we routed out maybe about halfway down, and we got a slightly bigger, a slightly narrower ply to fill that gap, and we cut it so that it fitted exactly onto the aperture we cut out. We laid the track right across the boards, right across the join, and then we connected it to the other boards, and then we once it was all pinned in position, we got our curbs the way we wanted them. Then we pinned it, we cut it with the Dremel so that this actually just fitted right in to the board. Now the problem was that the board join was a section brake because we were running DC control. So what we did was we slid the rails to the side and we cut two of the chairs away, and then we put an insulated fish plate in on both tracks, and that gave us the exact same section brake as before. And then what we did was at each side we cut away again a couple of chairs on these four ends, plus the two on the main boards, and we just slid, when we go to the show, we just slip that in and slide the fish plates in, and that's it. Well, we had done it without this, where the join was at the board join, but it was in a motor power depot and it just didn't work. The things kept derailing and stuff, so we decided to alter it to this method. Obviously the more tracks you've got, it's a wee bit more work, if you know what I mean. But this was the main way of us doing it on that particular bit of board. There is another wee bit that we did, which was the same principle. You just router out, the bit in the board, so that you cut a bit of ply to fit it exactly. You've got to be pretty accurate so that there's no gaps from the side. Slip it in, lay the track, cut it, and then there is another advantage of this, by the way, is, I don't know if you can see this, to see if I can zoom in a wee bit. Because the fish plates can be slid, along, you can get a fibre brush in and keep this joint clean, so that if there's any muck gets in there and causes problems with power, you can clean it up. Or if a fish plate gets damaged, you can just slide it out. I think there's a fish plate on there. I don't know, there's no, I thought there was. So that's it, the first way of doing it. The other way of doing it was what we had before. I'll take this wee bit out of the way so we can go back, zoom out a wee bit. Where the board join is, right, so that would be the board join. We hammer in each side a copper pin. We hammer it just below track level, so so that it's no above track level, and then we just solder it to the rail. So you just hammer it in there and there on the outside of the rails, and then get it below rail level, and then solder the pin to the rail, and that holds these in position. So when you put it, every time you put it in, it's bang on. But the reason it didn't work this time was because they were on a curve, so that's why we changed it. So that's two ways that you can do. As I say, you just get a bit of ply, that's thinner than your aperture and the bit you've cut out with the router. It's better to do it with a router, by the way, if you can get hold of a router, just to cut down. Better to do it, by the way, when you first go to make the lay. We had to do it later on, and it was a wee bit more of a problem later on, to be quite honest about it. But anyway, we managed it. So that's the first workshop I'm going to do. I'll be back in a wee minute. This is some of you were asking about buffer stops with the LED on them. Now, these are homemade buffer stops. Wait to see if I can bring it in again. There you are. And they're made with old bits of rail. And what we do is, obviously we cut it to shape. That's a bit of rail, and that there is another bit of rail, and we obviously cut it to shape. We solder them together, solder them onto the tack on both sides, and then you've got your a bit of plastic across to form the buffer beam, and then another two bits of plastic to form the actual buffer stop itself. You don't have to have these bits, but we put it on. Now, this is where it gets a wee bit ingenious, if you know what I mean. So this bit of track is for the buffer stop. What we do is, we put in insulated fish plates between this and this, so that when you put it onto the head shunt or whatever it is, this is now isolated from the track power. And what we do is we fit the LED and we solder the LED wires to the metal. Okay? And then we solder a wire to the track on both sides and run it under the board. That way the track actually acts as the power source. You can put your resistor, if your resistor's not built in to the buffer stop, you can put it in underneath the board. It means that this is self-powered now. Whatever you use, 12 volts or 5 volts, we use a module that is, you can vary it from 32 volts down to, I think it's 1.5. I think we've set it to 3 volts for our LEDs. And doing it that way, I think it takes up to 5 amps, I think, if I mind right. And if you fit a heatsink to the bridge rectifier, no, if you fit a heatsink to the bridge rectifier, it can do up to 5 amps, because obviously the heatsink disperses the heat. Other than that, I think it's 3 amps. The 3 amps will power quite a lot of LEDs for you, depending on how many milliamps they are each. So there you are. That's another wee thing that you can think up and you can work on yourself. Obviously, once you've soldered it all, you can paint it as we have done here, white. I just think it's a great way of doing your buffer stops, where it's actually part of the track, if you know what I mean. the Pico ones, the plastic ones, we had actually some of the plastic ones, and what we did was, to get the shape of the rails, we used that to get the shape of the rails, to bend them. Because obviously this, if what you've got to make sure that both sides are the exact same size, so that you get them parallel to the rails. But that's another wee workshop that I thought I would show you, how to build your own buffer stops with the LED. Some of them can be white. You can have white LED. I've seen that in buffer stops before, where you can have white LEDs, but a lot of them are red. The ones with the lights are mostly at mainline stations, although the Freightliner depot in Glasgow had a head shunt, if I mind right, and it had a white one on it. Yeah, it had a white one on it. Don't know why, but it did. But there you are. Just remember to put your insulated fish plates on both sides, so that it's isolated from the main track, and then power your LEDs from there. And just as a point of contact, if you're going to polish your rails, one of the things I don't normally use is a fibre brush, but for this purpose I would recommend a fibre brush. Just polish this up like you see, just a wee stroke with it. You can see that's quite highly polished at the end there. It's quite highly polished. I don't use them, as I've said this before and I'll say it again, I don't use them on wheels, and I don't use a fibre brush on motor commutators. The other name for it is a scratch brush, and scratch, what it does, it scratches, and that's why I don't use it on these things. But for the like of thinking up rails, I think it's a very, very good way of cleaning up rails. Either to put the wires on so that you get a nice flow of solder. The other thing is, other guys will disagree with me, and that's their prerogative. I always use flux. I always use flux with soldering. I flux the wire and I flux the rail or whatever I'm soldering onto. I flux both of them, and then I tin both of them so they're covered with a good quantity of solder. Doing it that way, the solder should flow no problem. I'll maybe do another wee workshop on that. The other thing is, with soldering, do not, other guys will disagree with this, do not use unleaded solder. Unleaded solder is a nightmare. We actually heard that the military will not use unleaded solder in any of their stuff. It's got to be leaded solder. And let's be honest about it, yes, you have to take precautions. Washing your hands when you're finished, always do that. And but there you are. That's another wee workshop for you. There are two wee workshops actually, and I hope it's helped you. So two wee workshops for you there. Very simple on how to do these things. It's not difficult. A wee bit of woodworking skills with the router now. Just take it a wee bit at a time, a wee bit depth. You get the depth you want. The other thing is, I'll take my specs off. The other thing is when you're because you've routered the board. I think if I mind right, we actually put another bit of ply underneath just to strengthen it, because if you take it down and you're going to weaken it, so you put a bit of, on both sides of the joint, put a bolster underneath it just to bolster it up, so that the board is just as, not just as thick, but just so it's no as thin, you know what I mean? And you should be okay. I know we've done two shows, I think, with that adaptation, and anything going through the motor power depot has run over that, no problem. I know, guys, what you've got to remember is, guys, that the fish plates are the weak spot, and the more fish plates you have, the more weak spots you have, which is why a lot of modelers do not use set track, because every section of curve you have or straight you have, you're doubling the amount of fish plates you use. Whereas if you use flexi track, it does away, you've got a full length of curved track, full length, and that does away with all these sections with fish plates. So you're cutting down, and if you're testing for power, if you've got a fault, you've got less fish plates to check on both sides, you know what I mean? Cut down in the fish plates, you'll cut down in the problems you have. So I hope these 2V workshops have helped you, and we'll be not thinking up more. We do have some in the pipeline. I've still not done the one in the roofs yet. I'll have to get back to that. In fact, even the Metcalf buildings I was doing, I've kind of stalled on that for the moment. I haven't given up on it. I just haven't managed to do it. I've been doing other things. But there we are. So for now, I'll say goodbye. Keep on modelling, keep on shunting, and may God bless you.